Fox News is now streaming live on Fox One. When news breaks, we don't just report it. We go beyond the headlines to get the full story. Get live coverage, in-depth analysis, and perspectives from the voices you trust, all in one place. Whether you're at home or on the go, stay connected to the stories shaping our world. Stream Fox News on Fox One. Download today.
By the time I hit my 50s, I'd learned a few things, like how family is precious. Work can always wait. And 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles. Not everyone at risk will develop it, but I did. The painful, blistering rash disrupted my life for weeks. Don't learn about your shingles risk the hard way. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
Hi there and welcome to the Byline podcast from the Byline Times with me, Adrian Goldberg. We are marking the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. The Ukrainian President Zelensky says that President Putin has already started World War III. Full scale of casualties is unknown, but more than 55,000 Ukrainians and 325,000 Russians are thought to have been killed in the conflict so far. We're joined by Zarina Zabriskie. She's been living in Ukraine for the last 4 years and is heading back there. She's just been attending the Munich Security Conference and screening her film Human Safari, based on her first-hand experience of dodging drones employed to kill unarmed civilians in Kherson, where she has been based. We're also joined by Sergei Kashilov. Sergei is a Ukrainian who had lived in Kyiv, now based in Birmingham, UK, where he continues to work for a furniture manufacturing company back home as their head of EU and UK imports. Welcome both. Firstly, Sergei, I just wouldn't mind getting your reflections on what it is like to live as an exile from your own country.
Well, definitely much better than for those who still staying in Ukraine. What can I say? All of our thoughts and about those friends and relatives we left there, and every day we still on our phones chasing for some news. It's like habit for years now, and every morning we send messages, are you okay, how are you? And it's like a small ritual now. So of course in the UK we are fine and safe here, but our thoughts are with those who still in Ukraine.
Zarina, when the full-scale conflict started back in 2022, it was expected that Russia would roll over Ukraine in pretty short order. That hasn't happened. How do you account for that?
Hi, Adrian. Hello, Sergey. Hi, everyone. Thanks for doing this on this very sad day. It's a commemoration. In no way it's any sort of celebration. Very important, like you said, Adrian, to mention that it's the beginning of the full-scale invasion, as the war has been going on since 2014. Also, it is very important, and I know my Ukrainian colleagues insist on that for a good reason, to call this a war, not a conflict, because the power is in the words, and we'll get back to that, as we talk. As for this question, thank you for asking it, but I think at this point, everybody kind of knows there is this fabulous, very well known and very true invincibility and the spirit of Ukrainian people. I think we are moving into something way more important now. After 4 years of full-scale invasion, we can actually make the assessments of the new strategies, not just the war as it's ongoing in Ukraine, but the new form of warfare is the future of the war. And this, I'm not sure any country, including Ukraine, can win single-handedly or has the strategy to win. And we are talking about the drone warfare. Hence my film, which, by the way, is called Kherson Human Safari, and really tells the story of the city from the beginning of the full-scale invasion, from the occupation, invasion, protests, flood. There are many other aspects to the war, but the title focuses on human safari, which is the name of the new tactic. Small FPV drones, not to be confused with the large Iranian-made or the Russian replica of Iranian drones that are programmed to fly very far and hit as far as Poland or any EU country. We're talking about small FPV drones, of which you and I, Adrian, spoke many, many times, and of which we, with Sergei and many other Ukrainians and European and American and worldwide volunteers, did a global rally in December 2025 to get the attention on it. So these small drones are hunting civilians in the streets, and now not just Kherson, but all along this very long front line. And this is something that I just brought to the Munich Security Conference. I screened the film. I also spoke to a couple of events, side events, speaking to the NATO generals. I came there with the commander of the anti-drone unit of the 34th Brigade. And together we brought the message that the world is not ready to fight back. There are the machines that are fighting from the sky, and we do not have the right defense. And this is, I believe, not a statement, but rather just a beginning of very, very necessary, urgent conversation. So I'll stop here and give it back to you, Adrian.
Well, indeed, and it's an important focus, and you really broke the story of this human safari, this new kind of warfare attacking civilians, which in the eyes of most independent observers amounts to a war crime by Russia. I think it's just also worth reflecting on the fact that over these last few years, we've all become much more aware, certainly those who have listened to this podcast, those who read the Byline Times and your other work, of the fact that warfare has changed in other respects, so that we now have this hybrid warfare fought through the internet, for example. I think it's just worth refreshing our memories, Irina, and explaining to people who may not be familiar with that term what exactly that means.
Well, I say that it's high time that every single listener and every single person, and not just listening to this program, but any program, familiarize themselves with the concept of hybrid warfare. It has many names. It changed names. I think the most fashionable now is cognitive warfare, which is only one aspect of hybrid warfare. It can include asymmetric warfare. And basically, it's anything but the conventional hot warfare as we know it from World War I or World War II. When we think war, we think tanks, we think ballistic missiles, bombs, and so forth. The war has morphed. It's emerged as a complex set of measures, and the most dangerous of them are actually targeting individual and collective minds. And this is where we, again, very unprepared. The way the Russian agents are operating, they are clandestinely, secretly plan a number of active measures, as it used to be called during the Soviet Union, engineered to change not just your opinion, but your very mentality, the way you think. And oftentimes it's not what you think, it's how you think. And it's even what you decide to think about. It's very sophisticated. There's the army and multi-billion-dollar industry behind this hybrid warfare. And if you've never heard this word, that's a little tingling that you should Google it, and don't take my word for it. You'll see a lot of good work dedicated to that.
Yeah, and definitely it is a real thing, and it is acknowledged as such by the British intelligence services. Sergei, let's talk a little bit more about your personal story. Of course, we talk about the full-scale invasion in 2022, but Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. When did it first dawn on you that something very serious was happening in your homeland?
Actually, for myself, it all started with Maidan. It was the first time ever I have seen that we might have our hope for a change. because how people were united and brave in this whole movement of Maidan. It was a real unity of people. And it was for myself maybe first turning point of us to become a nation, which we are now. Because straight away after Maidan, we know there was annexion of Crimea, some so-called retired or troops who was called on vacation, some sort of tricky story, dodgy story, Russian propaganda made up everyone to believe in, but it was total lie. And the war started actually, with the Crimea annexation and Donbas region. Yeah, the war came to Donetsk and Lugansk. I do remember these times because I was working in Ukraine, and Donetsk and Lugansk were both cities were under my responsibility of sales. So yeah, I knew people who lived there. I had lots of ties, business connection with Donbas region as well. Yeah, and it was so unbelievable to see how everything was destroyed. I mean, human lives, death of people, everything. Yes, it was shocking, but only when full-scale invasion broke through in 2020 it was a real game change for everyone, because we simply reassessed what things are big and matter and which are not.
Again, for people who may not be aware of the history or perhaps don't know the history, you're referring back to the Maidan protests back in 2014.
Late 2013, actually it was just February 20th, the day where hundreds of people were shot at Maidan. It was in February 2014.
And this was people in Ukraine protesting against the then president, Yanukovych, who was seen as pro-Russian, and saying that you as Ukrainians wanted to reclaim your sovereignty and go back to the constitution of 2004 and assert yourself as a sovereign nation.
Yes, and to reconfirm that we were moving towards joining EU at some point, and of course we would be happy to be admitted to NATO, but who knows, yeah.
And Zarina, this was obviously a red rag to a bull to Putin. I'm not excusing the aggression of Putin in any way. Let me make that clear. It was absolutely the right of people in Ukraine to protest and to defend their sovereign independence. But perhaps that also made Putin aware that his dreams of creating this greater Russian empire, a reconquest of Ukraine, would not happen without the imposition of force.
I don't believe so. In fact, there is a lot of evidence showing that Putin was planning to invade Ukraine as early as 2005 and even earlier. There were a number of campaigns ongoing pertaining to the very same hybrid warfare that we have mentioned today. For instance, there were a number of literary series, yellow press romance, which were romanticizing the idea of Russian dominance over Ukraine and basically depicting Ukraine as non-existent and bringing up all the negative connotations that later were used really widely. So I believe that it's not just Ukraine. We'll have the same instance in Georgia, where I've been reporting last year. As you may recall, the same pattern happened when people stood up for the European Union course. Then restrictions and oppression started. And yes, the idea behind it is to build the empire. But it wasn't the response to the actions of the people of Ukraine, just as the whole narrative of NATO invading Russia or the NATO borders being moved and therefore giving Putin the reason to invade are fake narratives. It's simulacra. It's not the causation there. It's the other way around. He needed to invade, and they would wake up each and every cause to use, and the naive, often audience in the West buys it and starts working with that. That's a good example.
Hands up then. I've obviously been taken in by this naive narrative.
I know you know better than that, but sometimes it's easy if you're not an expert in this region. For instance, I'm not an expert on Sudan, right? I'm not an expert on Venezuela. I will need expertly opinions of people who spend time there, who studied that, and I will read, and it will be difficult for me to make this judgment. However, like here, Sergey, who's the native of Ukraine and the resident of Ukraine, or me, who studied and spent a lot of time in Ukraine, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy, but we can bring out this opinion that can then provide our audience with the means of taking their own decision.
Sergey, over these years, I think it's fair to say the United Kingdom, correct me if I'm wrong, has been a good friend of Ukraine in terms of providing arms and providing refuge for people from Ukraine. How do you see the assistance that Ukraine has received from the West more generally, from the European Union and from the United States?
Yes, I couldn't agree more that UK takes the leadership in the European Union even after Brexit. What they do for Ukraine, it's really incredible, yeah. And they were the one and the first who has always supported us on political stage, on economical, providing security for our children here, for those who fled war. Yeah. But generally speaking, if we can talk about West as a broader number of countries, including Europe, US, for my personal opinion, I don't think it's been done enough, because there's always feeling that we are given something to just stay alive, to survive, not to fight back with the whole resilience, whole force we are capable of. Yes, I do understand that there are some economical reasons behind that, because even Germany is drying out with some type of missiles recently. Yes, probably manufacturing weaponry process are not set up well enough to sustain such a big, massive war in the center of Europe. But I know that Ukrainian military business sector has been doing really great, thriving at this time, because life changes. Life demanded for us to act quick, to be smart enough to create some new weaponry. And it's weird for me why more investment is not coming into this sector right now, because Ukrainians are capable of defending ourselves and to create some really cheap and efficient weapons. That's my opinion. I might be wrong.
No, indeed, if I may jump in, coming back from the Munich Security Conference, this is the very subject that were discussed there, and the subject that we'll hear more about. Those agreements are in place, and we will see more and more cooperation and innovation. In fact, during the time of the Munich Security Conference, Zelensky with Pistorius were introducing the first joint produced drone in the safe location joint factory. So we'll see more and more of that. But I also want to add that it's not just the matter of will or charity for the United Kingdom or the United States, for that matter, to help Ukraine. We constantly forget about the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed at the time by the United Kingdom, the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. I'm not going to go into details. Again, you can look it up.
I think it is just worth pointing out, Zorin, again, to people who don't know, but under that memorandum, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, Soviet-era nuclear weapons, which were located in Ukrainian territory, and Ukraine gave those up in the interest of making the world a safer place. But the deal was that having given up their nuclear deterrent, they would get protection. That was the deal. There was a security guarantee that went along with that.
And also, it wasn't just these four countries participating, but there also France and China. They signed separate agreement providing individual guarantees. And then what happened? Russia actually invaded Ukraine. The United States, after extended period of doing something, also just dropped the agreement. And in fact, has been erased from the White House website whatsoever, from the archive. You cannot find it there anymore. And the United Kingdom is doing a lot. And I know that Ukrainian people are very thankful to the United Kingdom. I speak to people all the time and I hear that. But again, it was an obligation. It wasn't just like out of free will, charity, somebody donated. This was an official international law document. And if it's worthless, then we need to revise our whole concept of international law, which we actually might be doing because we know what's happening across the ocean.
Well, indeed. And I just think it is worth talking directly about that. I mean, my understanding is that so far the United States has allocated something like $187 billion towards the defense of Ukraine. But Trump has clearly signaled his belief that might is right, that he does not believe in the traditional, conventional, rules-based international order. And over the next 2 years, the money allocated to the defense of Ukraine by the United States has fallen to just $400 million. And there's a perception, certainly amongst the people I talk to, that when it comes to peace talks, Trump is very keen to be seen as the peacemaker, regardless almost of the cost of that to Ukraine as a sovereign, independent nation.
I believe the mistake here, as we often make in discussing Putin's intention, Putin's philosophy, Putin's views, or Trump's philosophy, views, and so forth, that's irrelevant. That is my personal opinion as a journalist who's been reporting on the hybrid warfare and on the war for over a decade, that certain things are not to be discussed because, again, as in hybrid warfare, it takes us away from a simple fact that these people are incapable of reasonable governing, and we should not engage them in giving them a benefit of the doubt. At this point, and maybe it's a good point to bring in the opinion of Ukrainian people, which I hear a lot being on the ground in Kherson, in Odessa, in other cities in Ukraine and along the front line, that they can only believe in their own army, in the Ukrainian armed forces. And people are donating, people are fighting, people are becoming the army to defend themselves, because at this point, the faith in some international authorities, entity, law is practically lost.
Do you have any faith in the international community of nations, Sergei?
It's kind of tricky question, because from what we learned, we can only rely on ourselves. So I wouldn't be that much prone to believe in any international law going forward. Not today, definitely. Sorry.
Sergei, you've been living in the UK for a while. I can see that. You're very diplomatic. Because, and for me, being an American and living in Kherson for 4 years, I'm just blunt.
Sergei, I want to end with you and just get your thoughts, really, of what your hopes are going forward. I know that your work, because you deal with UK and EU companies, might bring you to the UK anyway, so it's not unusual that you might be here. But do you hope one day to return to live in Ukraine? And what are your bigger hopes for your country?
Yes, of course. I do not consider myself staying here in the UK any longer than it needs for my job here or for my family safety. We are totally keen to get back to Ukraine once we can do so.
Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, as always, to Zarina. And good luck back in Hesson. We'll touch base with you again very soon, Zarina. In the meantime, before we go, just a reminder that the Byline podcast is supported by subscriptions to the Byline Times. It is our brilliant monthly newspaper edited by Hadit Matharu. You can read articles by Zarina and other fantastic writers as well, including the best of our online content and articles that you won't read anywhere else. So do head over to our newsbreaking website, bylinetimes.com, and take out a subscription if you can. Thanks very much indeed for listening. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you've enjoyed this podcast. Cheers now. Bye-bye.